Thank you very much. Ecological time machine. I have an alternate title, a story of how gigapixel imagery might help save the planet. Yes, the story does start on Mars. Back in 2004, when the Spirit and Opportunity rovers had landed on Mars, they were sending back this beautiful imagery back to Earth, and the scientists at NASA were processing that data. This gentleman, Randy Sargent, was a senior systems engineer at NASA Ames and at Carnegie Mellon. He was part of the intelligent robotics group that was responsible for processing these images and composing them into these seamless panoramas like you see there. And his manager at the time was Ela Norbash, who is a professor at Carnegie Mellon University, the Robotics Institute in Pittsburgh. He's also my boss. He leads a lab called the Create Lab, where I work. But Ela was on sabbatical at NASA Ames for the year, and he was Randy's manager. And he told the group, all right, bring me your kind of crazy ideas, your blue sky ideas. Let's kind of shake things up and see what we can actually are actually possible and bring them to fruition. And so Randy had been processing all these Mars images and had the idea and brought it to Ela and said, we need to do this for Earth. And Randy made the leap that, sure, you can take these images with these complicated rovers, but Randy said, no, we can do it low cost, really easy to use, and people can use their existing digital cameras. And so the device he envisioned, essentially you have your tripod, you have this robotic device that fits on top, it's a camera mount, and you put your digital camera on that, and it would pan and tilt your camera and take the photos for you. And so back in 2004, kind of the dark ages, a digital camera might have 3 or 5 megapixels, like my iPhone has 8 now, and it's a phone. And so Randy was thinking, with this device, this robotic camera mount, we could easily have gigapixel images, so 1 billion pixels, not just 1 million. And so they immediately knew it was a winner. Not technologically, I mean, yes, it is technologically a winner, but the main motivation is that it's really powerful, emotionally powerful, but also scientifically powerful, and certainly very compelling. So they decided to create a project called GigaPan, and they partnered, NASA and Carnegie Mellon, with a company called Charm Labs out of Texas, made the first beta unit that you see here. So NASA, Carnegie Mellon, and Google provided the initial funding for this. So that's the original beta unit. Now, 8 years on, there's a commercial company called GigaPan Systems. We spun out this company in 2008. They're located in Portland. They have 3 models here. The middle one is the Pro unit with for big DSLRs. And the one on the right is the entry level. It's about $300. The Pro unit is $900. So we have a website, gigapan.com, with about 100,000, not quite, almost 100,000 panoramas, mostly taken with GigaPan, but not all of them. And I'll show you examples later of that. And so it's been pretty successful so far. And we at the Create Lab are continuing to innovate the technology and find new ways of using it for outreach and education and scientific understanding. And we're also working with artists now as well, which has been very exciting. So I'm going to take a little aside here, if I can, and talk a little bit about the lab, because it's important to me, but I think it's also important to understand kind of where we're coming from, what our motivations are. It kind of sets the framework for everything else that I'm going to talk about and helps you understand why we do what we do. Again, it's led by Ela Norbash, a professor at the Robotics Institute. When I joined the lab 7 years ago, almost 7, there were only 4 of us. We now have about 30 people, extremely diverse group. We have computer scientists like myself, we have electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, artists, graphic designers, psychology majors, educators. It's a great group, but somehow we've managed to maintain a focus that we kind of have a personal litmus test. For everything that we take on, it has to have the potential for a positive social impact or an educational component, or improving the quality of life or the environment. We have, we have a satellite office now in Huntington, West Virginia, with others on the way, hopefully. So we're growing pretty well. We actually have a team of a few people dedicated to outreach. And you can see here a map of locations of people all around the world that we've worked with. It's about 400 organizations and roughly 16,000 people. That's just since they've been keeping track. So we think we're doing a good thing, but hopefully our motivations will be obvious throughout the rest of this talk. If you want to learn more, the website is there, cmucreatelab.org. Okay, so I kind of want to give, this is a really simple animation. I'm a programmer, I'm not a designer. You'll see that it's simple. But kind of give you a better idea of how the GigaPan works. I wish I had brought one. If I had, I could show you. To set it up, you program it by teaching it the extents of the scene that you want to capture. So if I were to take a picture of the audience, I would say, this is the top left, this is the bottom right. And you also program the GigaPan and tell it your camera's field of view. So I might zoom in on a single face, and then it figures out how many shots it needs to take. So for some area like this, it may be 300 different photos. And then you pretty much say go, and it does its thing, and it pans around. Now this model, the one you see there, is the Pro unit, so it has a little USB cable that plugs in, and that's what's doing the triggering. The lower-end models have actually a little robotic trigger finger that's pushing that universal interface, the little button. And so it's taking all these shots as it goes along, and it'll finish here in just a second. And then once you're done with that, you take the camera card out, you put it in your computer, load all the images on your computer, and run it through software we have called GigaPan Stitch, and it stitches it all into a seamless panorama. So this is one I took a few years ago. This is Pittsburgh. And we're going to zoom in on some kayakers here that you couldn't see when you're zoomed all the way out. And this isn't really even a very large GigaPan. This is probably maybe 100 megapixels at the most. It's bigger than a camera can take, but certainly not our biggest. And we'll zoom in here on the banner on the bridge, and sure enough, you can read the text. So hopefully you're wondering, like, okay, big. How big is big? I think the answer is really, really damn big. This is the current record holder. I mean, the records keep getting broken, which is fun. This is Shanghai Skyline, done by Alfred Zhao. 272 gigapixels, 12,000 photos to create this one. But it's not the biggest. This one's the biggest. And you're probably thinking, this is terrible. It looks like orange static. It does from this level. A lot of things zoomed out enough aren't that interesting. This is a simulation of the early universe as it could have been at one point when the universe was only 1.3 billion years old. So there was a frustrating lack of gigapans 12 billion years ago, so they just simulated it. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Well, first I want to say, this is 1.1 terapixels. That's trillion pixels. And so, if you can see that little white square isolated there, we'll zoom in on that, and you're starting to see some structure. So they're modeling gases and particles and how they condense with gravity to form galaxies and black holes. And we'll zoom in again. Now, I'm kind of faking the zoom here, just with some simple animation, because I couldn't fit the panorama on my computer. Let's see if my laser pointer works. The little green circles there are black holes, and everything else are stars and galaxies. And each of the white pixels that you see is representing an area of 9 million square light years. This is a really big simulation. Our Milky Way galaxy would fit into a box of 5 by 5 pixels. So if that doesn't make you feel small, I don't know what will. To kind of give you an idea, I mean, 1.1 trillion pixels. If you were to print this out, you'd need a piece of paper about the size of 9 American football fields, including the end zones. Most people don't have paper that big. You could use 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper, but you'd need over 1 million to do it. So it's really, really big. This is our current record holder. It probably will be for quite a while. Okay, so we go from the very big now to the very small. This is a barnacle on a crab shell that had washed up on the beach. And the scientists who took this, they used a scanning electron microscope. I'm going to zoom in on some diatoms. I could look at this all day. I love this one. It's pretty neat. They used a GigaPan, but they took it apart first. They took out the little stepper motors, and they hooked them to the XY knobs on the scanning electron microscope. And then they pretty much said, go. Because otherwise, it's really boring to take a picture. You're adjusting the knobs on the SEM. And so they automated the process. And that's the unit they built. They call it the Nano GigaPan. The next one, this is petroglyphs in Saudi Arabia. This is done by Dr. Sandra Olson at the Carnegie Museum of Natural History, which is literally right next door to my office. So she was invited by the Saudi government to image these, and this is taken by Richard Bryant, the photographer. You have to have special permission to even take these images, so it was quite a privilege for her. Scientifically, it's interesting because not many people have access to this. I'm going to zoom in here. This is a lion. You can see its claws, and the large mane. But this is great for scientists because they don't have to actually go there to study it. But it's also important because these are in danger of erosion. This is a sheep and a Neolithic man. But there's also danger of vandalism. Okay, so next, this is Dr. Stuart Pimm's, one of his panoramas. He's at Duke University, of Patagonia. And this is an area that was formerly farmland that had been overgrazed by sheep, and a lot of the native animals were being driven out because there just wasn't any food left. I'm going to zoom in here down to the lake, and we'll see a few little guanaco there. They're similar to domestic llama. And so he's documenting the change of this land as it's now conservation land. It's no longer farmland, and see how it's becoming wild again. And so this is one of the happy GigaPans. It's actually, things are going better. This is, it says penguins in Antarctica. You probably can't see any penguins now, but we'll zoom in, and you can see them. So this is Stephanie Genouvrier. She's a researcher, does her work in Antarctica, and she counts penguins. Counting these wouldn't be a lot of fun because there's so many, but it's possible now with the GigaPan. And so she can take the whole scene and figure out how many penguins there are, and she's studying penguin population and how it's affected by climate change and ecosystem change. All right, so this is a pristine chimpanzee habitat in Tanzania. This is an area just south of the Jane Goodall Institute's conservation lands. And so that's what the pristine habitat looks like. We're going to zoom in a little bit, and you see a tree. Now, there's something funny going on with this tree. It's missing its bark all around the base. And somebody has, they call ringed the tree, where they cut off all the bark in order to kill it. And you're going to see why here in a second. It's a tobacco field. So it's littered with tree stumps. Looks like something out of the Lorax, maybe. So, pretty terrible. So, another good reason to stop smoking. So, probably with a lot of these, you may have noticed that the images are very compelling. They could be more compelling if you could kind of do before and after, or analyze change over time. And so a lot of scientists have been coming to us saying, we really need this. We need to be able to do time-lapse. And so about a year and a half ago, we started what we call GigaPan Time Machine. This is, again, led by Randy Sargent, and other people on the project are Jeff Keller, Paul Dilley, and myself. And so the idea is you take a GigaPan, then you take a whole bunch of GigaPans, and you composite them into a movie. So this is not just HD video, this is like UHD, Ultra HD video. And so it's combining GigaPan technology, but making it into movies. So this is one of our earliest ones. This is done by Dr. Janet Stephen in Sweetbriar College. These are brassica plants, also called Wisconsin fast plants. We're going to zoom ahead in time, and you'll see where the flowers are. This is what you get for being on the cutting edge. It'll load up here in just a second. There we go. So the flowers have bloomed, and the pistils are now growing into fruits that kind of look like green beans. So after this, we're going to go back in time a little bit. You see the plants shrinking as we go back in time. This little white rectangle is a piece of wax paper that's been seeded with caterpillar eggs. And you can't see them at first when they hatch, but you'll see their effects. You see there's holes appearing on the leaves, and then soon the leaf is destroyed. And if you look carefully, hopefully you'll be able to see the caterpillars themselves, little green guys. They're getting bigger and bigger as it goes along, but you'll see they're crawling around the stems. They start eating the flowers. They're eating the stems, and they eat the stalk of the plant altogether. Yeah, they get hungrier and hungrier as they get bigger. And we'll see them, as they get really big, they really start to destroy things. There's a large leaf coming up here soon. There it is. It will be chomped very quickly. There we go. So that's a really fun one. There's also in this video, you can view this at timemachine.gigapan.org. You can look at stink bugs, and you'll see the plants fall over when the stink bugs are on them because they weigh so much. This is a diseased bee colony, and the researchers were looking at this and studying the hygienic bees that are responsible for cleaning out any of the cells which have a diseased larva in it. This is healthy larva right now, and then by day 5, it gets capped over as normal. And then at some point, the hygienic bees discover that, I don't know how they do it, but this larva is diseased. So they uncap it around day 7, and sure enough, the bee experts can tell that this is a diseased larva, and the hygienic bee will clean it out, empty the cell, and it remains empty for the rest of the study. I added this one just because it's ridiculously cool. This is a solar dynamics observatory. So a day in the life of the sun is just 24 hours. And this large diagonal cut across the sun they call a filament. And there's also some coronal loops there on the edges. These things, the filaments can be stable for a while and then just suddenly erupt. And you'll see it here pretty soon. It'll be obvious when it actually does erupt. There we go. So some of this matter is actually being ejected out into space, and some of it falls back to the sun. So we started on Mars, we went to Earth, and now we're at the sun. Okay. The next one, this is also satellite data. I should mention that I started out talking about GigaPan. Obviously, not everything we have is done with the GigaPan. It wasn't somebody up in space with the GigaPan. These are satellite images that we've composited together. So this is to study ocean chlorophyll. You can see the scale on the right. Red is high concentration of chlorophyll, and purple and blues are the low. I'm going to start out looking just at seasonal changes, and you can see how things are moving. And eventually we'll zoom in to the Gulf of Mexico, to the Mississippi Delta, and you'll be able to see along the coastlines where there's a lot of runoff from farmlands. It's very red there, and before long we'll see kind of a squirt of red. I don't think that's a technical term, but there it is, a squirt of red down into the Gulf. And so this is a concern because these are indicative of algae blooms that can suffocate the sea life there. All right, so the last one for today is the Earth Observatory Blue Marble time lapse. I'm going to start out by zooming in on the Amazon rainforest. And hopefully, I don't know if it's too dark or not, up in this area you can see it the most. So what I've done is, we only have 12 frames of videos. There's one for each month of the year in the year 2004. So I'm just cycling it over and over. So you'll see some deforestation, then it'll repeat the process over and over so you can see it. As we get more data, we'll certainly add more years to this, and it'll become more obvious and probably more depressing. So after this, we're going to zoom back out and go over to the Himalayas, where we can view the seasonal changes, changes on the snow caps in the mountains. So we have about 12 or 13 data sets right now on the timemachine.gigapan.org site. We have a lot more coming, at least as many just still being queued up. They take a lot of computer processing to get them online, but they're coming soon. So what next? Hopefully I don't need to say a whole lot to put too fine a point on it. I mean, I think the images kind of stand for themselves, that they are useful, they're compelling, both educationally, scientifically. So yeah, saving the planet is next. I know that there's data out there. There are probably many of you in the audience who have data that you want to share, you want to visualize. We obviously have the tools. Let's get together and let's try to save the planet. Thank you.